Mr. Speaker, I'm now very pleased to yield 5 minutes to my friend, the gentleman from Texas, the sponsor of this legislation and a great member of the Financial Services Committee, Mr. Williams.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Speaker. It is truly a privilege to speak in support of my bill, H.R. 4324, the Strengthening Oversight of Iran's Access to Finance Act. Mr. Speaker, H.R. 4324 will improve congressional oversight of any financing that Treasury authorizes for aircraft sales to Iran. Every 6 months, Treasury would need to certify to us that finance authorizations would not benefit an Iranian person that is transporting items for the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, nor providing transportation for sanctioned entities. Treasury would also have to certify to us that those authorizations don't pose a significant money laundering or terrorism finance risk to the U.S. financial system, and that any banks engaged in this business have appropriate due diligence procedures in place. If the Treasury Department cannot make this certification, the Department must tell us why, and it must explain to Congress the course of action it intends to take. I'd note that my bill was reported out of the Financial Services Committee last month by a vote of 38 to 21, with 5 of my Democratic colleagues voting in its favor. Many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will label this bill as a simple attempt to dismantle the Obama administration's Iran nuclear deal. We've already heard it. But, Mr. Speaker, this debate is not about U.S. commitments under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA. It is not about reimposing nuclear sanctions. It is not about prohibiting these aircraft sales or the financing of these sales. What this legislation is about is providing Congress with information on the implications of these deals so that we can better understand their impact on the integrity of our financial system. I'd like to take a step back and discuss how we got to this point and why this legislation is necessary. As most of you know, under the JCPOA, the Obama administration committed the United States to license the sale of commercial aircraft to Iran. In addition to providing licenses for aircraft sales, the licenses also allowed for banks to engage in the financing of these aircraft. All of this was permitted despite the fact that Iran remained classified as a jurisdiction of primary money laundering concern by the Treasury Department and as the world's foremost state sponsor of terror by the State Department. Let us be abundantly clear on the facts. It was the Obama Treasury Department that highlighted the role that Iran and Iranian aircraft played in the destabilizing activity across the Middle East and in supporting the atrocities committed by the rogue Assad regime in Syria. On September 9, 2012, David S. Cohen, Treasury Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence under President Obama, released the following statement. He said, "The identification of Iranian aircraft also further highlights Iran's effort to support the Assad regime's weapons of mass destruction programs and crack down against the Syrian people." This quote followed the Treasury's Department announcement to impose sanctions against entities that support the Assad regime in Syria. So, quoting from the same September 9, 2012 Treasury statement, as a result of the Iranian Threat Reduction and Syria Human Rights Act of 2012, foreign financial institutions that knowingly engage in a significant transactions with Iran Air, Mahan Air, or Yaz Air, including any of the 117 aircraft operated by these airlines, risk losing access to the U.S. banking system. Mr. Speaker, this week I received a memo from the National Iranian American Council urging members to oppose my bill. This is the same council that opposes President Trump's travel ban, which was recently upheld by a Supreme Court decision of 7-2, and the same organization that took concern with new sanctions imposed on Iran's support for Hezbollah. This memo and the pro-Iran principles that it represents could not be a better endorsement for the strengthening oversight of Iran's Access to Finance Act. I would ask this to my colleagues on both sides. At what point did we relegate ourselves to negotiating with those who wish us harm? At what point did we prioritize the interests of a rogue government that paints their bombs with sayings like death to Israel and death to America? When did that happen? These are simply two sides to this issue. You can either protect the interests of the United States, her citizens, and the U.S. financial institutions, or you can make important the wishes of the Ayatollah and his Revolutionary Guard. Which side do you choose to be on? That is the question. I represent the red, white, and blue, and my commitment to the
Gentleman's time has
safety and
expired.
well-being
I yield the gentleman an additional 30 seconds.
of the
Gentleman's
United
recognized
States
for
is totally
additional 30
unwavering.
seconds.
I urge my colleagues to do the same. Support the red, white, and blue, and support H.R. 4324.